We can create a settings panel in our analytic apps using a combination of images, pop-up windows, and other widgets. In this example, we want to be able to do three things: filter the table and chart on the canvas based on groups of measures, switch between the table and chart, and choose which specific members within a group will display. We'll start by adding a drop-down widget that will enable users to choose a measure group. We'll move the widget into place and rename it so we can easily identify it in the scripts we'll create later. Next, we'll define which measure groups we want users to be able to filter on, starting with gross margin. The remaining groups have been added. We can now apply our changes. We'll also add, position, and rename a label for the measure group dropdown. Next, we'll add an icon which users will use to open the settings panel. We'll navigate to and import a local file, add it to the canvas, and give it a more meaningful name. Now we'll add and rename a pop-up window. We can configure the look of the window by enabling the header and footer. We'll add a title and adjust the IDs for the OK and Cancel buttons. We'll also ensure that the OK button is emphasized by default and both buttons are enabled and visible. Here on the tab for the pop-up window, we can add other widgets that are visible only when the pop-up window is open. We'll start by adding and configuring a radio button group widget that will enable users to switch between the table and the chart. We'll update the values with our two options, and rename the widget. We'll also add a checkbox group widget that will allow users to choose specific measures in a selected measure group. We'll rename the widget and add a label, and then edit the values for the checkboxes to show actual, plan, absolute, and percentage deviation. The remaining values have been updated. We can now apply our changes and resize the widget to fit the contents. The next step is to write a script for the settings icon so that when users click it, the pop-up window opens. A new tab opens where we can build a script to define what happens when the function is called. Note that we can get assistance by pressing Ctrl+Space, which brings up a list of objects and methods we can use to build our statements. In this example, we'll select the pop-up window, add a period, open the content assistance again to select the open function, and end the statement with a semicolon. Next, we'll create 3 script variables to contain the values selected in various widgets. The first script variable will hold both the measure group from the drop-down widget and the specific measures from the checkbox group widget. We'll rename the variable, leave the type as the default of string, and set the variable as an array to hold multiple values. The second script variable will hold the current measure filter from the drop-down widget. We'll define a default value of gross margin. The third script variable will hold the measures selected from the checkbox group in the pop-up window. This one is also an array. Now we'll create a script object to define what will happen when a filter is selected. We'll rename the folder as Utils and the function as setMeasureFilter. We'll also add an argument for the selected ID. Now we'll define what the setMeasureFilter function does. Here, we add statements to remove the measure filters from the table and chart, and insert the selected measure instead. Now we'll define what happens when a user selects a measure group from the drop-down list. In this script, we first declare a variable and initialize it as the selected key from the drop-down, and then remove the measures of these measure groups from the chart. Then we save the current selection in the current measure group script variable. Next, we see which measures were selected in the checkbox in the pop-up window so that we can filter on all the inputs the user gave us. After getting these values, we remove any old filters used and apply the new ones. To get a valid filter, we concatenate the selected measures into a filter statement. Finally, we save the concatenated filter statement in our current measure filter selection pop-up script variable and the selected keys of the checkbox group in the current measure selection script variable. The final script we need to write is for the buttons in the pop-up window. First, we add an if statement that differentiates the buttons according to their IDs. Note that most of the remaining statements are inside this array. Then we get the selections from the checkbox group in the pop-up window and remove the measures currently being used as filters for the chart. We concatenate the selected measures into a filter statement and apply it to the chart and table. We save the concatenated filter statement in our current measure filter selection pop-up script variable and the selected keys of the checkbox group in the current measure selection script variable. Now we get the selected key of the radio button group in the pop-up window. If the user chooses to show the table, we set the table to visible and the chart to invisible, and vice versa if the user chooses to show the chart. Finally, we close the pop-up when the user clicks either button. Now we'll save our changes and run the application. When we click on the settings icon, the pop-up window appears. First, we'll choose to show the chart. The chart displays with the same measures as were shown in the table. We can also choose which measures display within the measure group. Only the actual and planned versions from the gross margin measure group display. If we change the measure group, the same versions are visible. If we switch back to the table, the same measures display. Thanks for watching.